Ambassador Park Hyun-woo took a deep breath as the massive doors of the Galactic Court of Justice slid open with a soft hiss. The sound echoed through the corridor behind them, but ahead lay something that made his heart race with both excitement and nervousness. The crystalline structure stretched impossibly high above their heads, its translucent walls pulsing with waves of blue and silver light that seemed to dance like liquid starlight. "Holy stars," whispered Kim Sora, his legal advisor, as she clutched their case files tighter against her chest. The pictures didn't do this place justice. Lee Dongmin, their security chief, kept his eyes moving constantly across the alien crowd flowing around them. His hand instinctively rested near his sidearm, though he knew weapons were strictly forbidden in the court. Old habits from his military days died hard. "Stay close," he muttered. "Some of these species I've never seen before." The trio moved through the entrance hall, their boots clicking against the smooth crystal floor. Hyun-woo marveled at the architecture.
Oh.
The walls seemed to be carved from a single massive crystal, with veins of light running through them like the nervous system of some cosmic being. Floating platforms carried various alien dignitaries between different levels of the structure, while holographic displays showed court schedules in dozens of different languages. Remember, Hyun-woo whispered to his team as they approached the main courtroom. This territorial dispute with the Vorthok Empire isn't just about those 3 colony worlds. This could determine whether Earth gets a real voice in the galactic community or remains a backwater planet begging for scraps. Sora nodded, her dark eyes serious behind her glasses. She had spent months preparing for this case, studying galactic law and the complex territorial agreements that govern colonial expansion. "The Vorthok claim is weak," she said quietly. "They're saying we violated the settlement accords, but our colonies were established before we even knew those accords existed." "That's the problem with being the new kids in the galaxy," Dongmin observed. "Everyone expects us to follow rules we never agreed to." As they entered the main courtroom, Hyun-woo felt his breath catch in his throat. The space was enormous, with tiers of seating rising up like an ancient amphitheater. But instead of stone, everything was made of the same living crystal, pulsing gently with internal light. The ceiling was transparent, offering a breathtaking view of Nexus Primes. 3 moons hanging in the star-filled sky, the courtroom buzzed with activity. Dozens of alien species filled the gallery, creating a symphony of sounds unlike anything on Earth. 8-legged arachnoids, each the size of a small car, clicked their razor-sharp mandibles in rapid conversation. Their metallic exoskeletons gleamed under the courtroom's lights. Their cluster of eyes tracked every movement with predatory precision. Near the back, gaseous nebulans floated in their transparent containment suits, their cloudy forms shifting and swirling in patterns that Hyun-woo assumed must be their version of body language. When they spoke, their voices came through speakers attached to their suits, creating an eerie chorus of whispers. Reptilian saurians sat in the middle section, their scales changing color slowly as they communicated through chromatic displays. A group of insectoid mantis people nearby remained perfectly still, their compound eyes reflecting the room's light like mirrors. At the center of it all sat Judge Thexmorin, and he was even more imposing than the briefing videos had suggested. The judge stood nearly 10 feet tall, his purple skin covered in intricate tattoos that seemed to move and shift in the light. 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows across his broad forehead blinked independently, while a 7th eye in the center of his forehead remained closed. His breathing apparatus, a complex device that covered the lower half of his face, hummed quietly as it processed the courtroom's atmosphere. "Intimidating, isn't he?" Sora murmured. "That's the point," Dongmin replied. "The Galactic Court chooses judges specifically to command respect from all species." The Bailiff, a heavily armored Titan-class enforcement droid, announced their case in a voice that resonated through the crystal walls. Case 47 Alpha. Earth Colony Rights versus Vorthok Imperial Claims. All parties present themselves before the court. Judge Thexmorin activated his translation device, and his voice filled the courtroom with surprising gentleness. "This court recognizes the territorial dispute between the human colony worlds of New Sol New Busan, and New Incheon, and the competing claims of the Vorthok Empire. Will the parties approach the bench as the human delegation walked toward the defendants? Table Hyunwoo noticed something odd. The general murmur of conversation in the gallery began to die down. It wasn't the respectful quiet that usually accompanied formal proceedings, but something else entirely. It felt almost like fear. Judge Thexmoran's 6 primary eyes began blinking, rapidly, each one closing and opening at different intervals. His breathing apparatus, which had been humming steadily, started making irregular sounds, quick, sharp intakes followed by long, shuddering exhales. Several alien spectators in the gallery shifted nervously in their seats. The arachnoid's mandible clicking became more agitated. While the Nebulan's gaseous forms swirled faster in their containment suits, even the usually stoic Saurians began displaying rapid color changes across their scales. This court... Thexmoran paused, his massive frame actually trembling slightly. His 7th eye, the one in the center of his forehead, suddenly snapped open, revealing a deep golden iris that seemed to stare directly into their souls. This court requires a brief recess to address technical difficulties. But Sora had been watching the courtroom carefully, and she noticed what everyone else was trying to pretend wasn't happening. Every single alien in the room was staring at the 3 humans with expressions that, despite their vastly different facial structures, could only be described as fear. The message arrived at 0347 hours, jolting Ambassador Park Hyunwoo from his sleep in the diplomatic quarters of Nexus Prime. The holographic display flickered to life above his bed, casting an eerie blue glow across his face as he read the official communication from the Galactic Court Administration. Request for enhanced security protocols. Case 47 Alpha flashed across the screen in bright red letters. Hyunwoo sat up, rubbing his eyes as he processed the words. Judge Thexmoran was formally requesting armed escorts for any future proceedings involving human defendants. The request cited unprecedented courtroom disruptions and potential risk to judicial personnel. What the hell? Hyunwoo muttered, swinging his legs out of bed. He quickly pulled on his clothes and made his way to the communications center, where he found Kim Sora, already hunched over a terminal, her fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. You got the message too? He asked. Got it, and 3 more just like it, she replied without looking up. Judges from the Andromeda Circuit and the Outer Rim Tribunal have filed identical requests. They all want armed security when dealing with humans. Lee Dongmin appeared in the doorway, still in his sleeping clothes but fully alert. Years of military training had taught him to wake up ready for action. Sir, I've been monitoring communication channels. There's chatter about us all, across the galactic networks, and it's not good chatter. I've been digging through the galactic legal database for the past 4 hours. What I found is... She hesitated. Well, it's disturbing. The 3 humans gathered around her workstation as she pulled up case files from across the galaxy. The holographic displays showed incident reports, medical records, and security footage that painted a picture none of them were prepared for. In the past month alone, there have been 3 separate incidents involving humans in galactic courts, Sora began, her voice tight with concern. And each one is more bizarre than the last. The first file opened with security footage from Station Omega-7, a massive space station that served as a regional court hub. The video showed a standard courtroom setup with Judge Crystal X presiding over a refugee case. The judge was a beautiful being, literally made of living crystal, that refracted light into rainbow patterns across the courtroom walls. This is Attorney James Park, no relation to you. Sir, representing a group of human war refugees seeking asylum, Sora explained as they watched the footage. Watch what happens during his closing argument. On screen, the human lawyer stood before the crystalline judge, his voice rising with passion as he described the horrors his clients had fled. He spoke of bombed cities, separated families, and the desperate hope for a new beginning. His words were raw, emotional, completely genuine. And then something impossible happened. Judge Crystal X began to vibrate, tiny fractures appearing along his crystalline surface. The beautiful rainbow refractions turned chaotic, flashing rapidly between colors. The judge's harmonic voice, usually so melodious, became a discordant screech. My molecular structure, the judge gasped through his translation device, cannot process this level of emotional resonance. I am experiencing cascade failure. With a sound like breaking glass amplified 1,000 times, Judge Crystal X literally shattered into millions of pieces, each fragment still glowing with internal light as they scattered across the courtroom floor. He's alive, Sora added. Quickly seeing their horrified expressions, crystalline beings can reform given time. But he's never returned to judicial duty. The second file was even more disturbing. The Centauri legal complex footage showed a telepathic judge from the Mindweaver species, a being that looked like a humanoid made of flowing silver liquid with no solid form. Mindweavers were renowned for their ability to process complex thoughts and emotions from multiple species simultaneously. The human witness, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Lisa Chen, had been asked to describe Earth's history for context in a territorial dispute. What followed was a simple, honest account of humanity's journey from primitive warfare to space exploration. She spoke of the world wars, the Cold War, the gradual realization that cooperation served them better than conflict. We learned that our capacity for both creation and destruction could be channeled, Dr. Chen said in the footage. We chose to reach for the stars instead of reaching for each other's throats. The Mindweaver judge began convulsing, his liquid form becoming chaotic and unstable. Psychic feedback screamed through the courtroom's telepathic dampeners, causing sensitive species to cry out in pain. The contradictions, the judge gasped before collapsing into a puddle of silver liquid. How can one species contain such capacity? For both love and hate, creation and destruction? My mind cannot reconcile the paradox. But the third incident was what truly shook them. The footage from Titan Base showed a routine trade dispute hearing. A human family was in the gallery, tourists who had been granted permission to observe galactic justice in action. Their 8-year-old daughter, bored by the proceedings, had asked her mother a question loud enough for the court's sensitive audio systems to pick up. "Mommy, why can't everyone just share the planets? There's so many of them." The child's innocent question hit the courtroom like a physical force. The 3-judge panel, representing different species from across the galaxy, simultaneously froze. Their various translation devices began malfunctioning, producing feedback loops of static and partial translations. "Emergency recess," the chief judge announced, his voice shaking. "This court cannot. We need time to process. Philosophical implications, ... The footage showed alien spectators fleeing the courtroom as if escaping some natural disaster. While the human family sat confused and alone in the gallery. "They're afraid of us," Sora said, closing the files. "But not because we're violent or technologically superior. They're afraid of what we represent." Dongman frowned, his military mind trying to process this information tactically. "I don't understand. What do we represent that's so threatening?" "Genuine emotion," Sora replied. "Raw, unfiltered humanity. These species have spent thousands of years evolving beyond what they consider primitive emotional responses. They make decisions based on logic, efficiency, collective benefit. But when humans enter their sterile, calculated world, we force them to confront something they've forgotten." Whoa, stared at the now blank screens. "What have they forgotten?" "It's how to feel," Sora said simply. "How to be genuinely moved by injustice, how to hope against impossible odds, how to love something more than logic dictates is reasonable. We're not just another species to them. We're a mirror reflecting what they used to be before they evolved past caring." The realization hit them like a cold wave. Humanity hadn't just joined the galactic community as another member species. They had arrived as living reminders of everything these advanced civilizations had sacrificed in their pursuit of logical perfection. And that, apparently, was the most terrifying thing in the galaxy. The transformation of the Galactic Court began. At dawn, on the 7th day after the incidents, Ambassador Park Hyunwoo stood at his hotel window, watching massive cargo ships descend from orbit, their hulls gleaming in the morning light of Nexus Prime's twin suns. Each ship carried specialized equipment, that would forever change how the galaxy viewed human legal proceedings. "Sir, you need to see this," Kim Sora called from across the room, her voice filled with disbelief. She was watching the galactic newsfeed on a holographic display, where a Zephyrian reporter was speaking in rapid, excited tones. The Galactic Court Administration has announced the immediate implementation of enhanced protection protocols. The reporter announced, her feathered crest fluffing with nervous energy. These measures, previously reserved for the most dangerous war criminals and entities capable of mass destruction, will now be mandatory for all proceedings involving representatives from the planet Earth. Lee Dongmin looked up from his security briefings, his expression grim. "They're treating us like we're radioactive." The first sign of the new protocols came when they arrived at the courthouse that morning. The familiar crystal structure was now surrounded by a perimeter of heavily armed security drones, their red scanning beams sweeping continuously across the plaza. Force field generators hummed at strategic points, creating invisible barriers that made the air shimmer like heat waves. Ambassador Park, a deep, rumbling voice called out as they approached the main entrance. "I am Captain Vexstar, your new head of security." Hyanwu stopped walking and looked up and up. Captain Vexstar was a living nightmare from humanity's darkest imagination of alien warriors. Standing nearly 12 feet tall, his natural exoskeleton was a matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The surface was covered in scars, dents, and burn marks that told the story of countless battles across the galaxy. His forearms moved with predatory grace, each one ending in hands that could crush steel. Two arms hung naturally at his sides, while the upper pair was equipped with integrated energy weapons that pulsed with barely contained power. His head was insectoid but intelligent, with compound eyes that could track multiple targets simultaneously. "Ergani species," Dongmin whispered, recognizing the alien from his military briefings. "They're the galaxy's premier warriors. If you need something destroyed, you call the Ergani." "Is this really necessary?" Hyanwu asked, gesturing toward the small army of security personnel that had appeared around them. Vexter's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Standard protocol now," he growled through his translator, the device struggling to convert his natural clicking sounds into human speech. "Every human case requires full tactical support. Court administrations. Orders." As they entered the courthouse, Hyanwu was amazed by the changes. The crystal walls now had armored plating at regular intervals, and energy barriers flickered around sensitive areas. Automated defense turrets had been installed in the corners, their targeting systems tracking every movement in the corridors. "They've turned a courthouse into a fortress," Sora observed, her voice echoing slightly in the no-militarized space. Workers in hazmat suits were installing additional equipment around the main courtroom. Transparent aluminum barriers were being erected around the judge's bench, thick enough to withstand direct hits from plasma weapons. The witness stand was now surrounded by a containment field that could be activated instantly. Emotional dampening. Fields Vexter explained, noticing their stares. It's designed to limit the range of human emotional projection. Judge Thex Morin specifically requested them after his ... experience. A team of technicians was calibrating stress monitoring equipment that would be attached to all judicial personnel during human proceedings. Heart rate monitors, brainwave scanners, and psychological stability indicators would now be mandatory for any alien dealing with humans in an official capacity. "This is insane," Dongmin muttered, watching a crew install what looked like medical emergency equipment. "They're preparing for casualties." "Not casualties," Vexstar corrected, his compound eyes focusing on the security chief. "Psychological trauma. Your species has already caused 3 judicial breakdowns in the past month. The court administration is taking no chances." As they entered the main courtroom for their first case under the new protocols, Hyanwu was struck by how different everything felt. The familiar space now looked like a military command center. Armored bailiffs stood at attention around the perimeter, their weapons clearly visible. Emergency medical teams waited in side chambers, ready to treat any alien personnel who might be overwhelmed by human presence. Judge Thex Morin took his position behind the reinforced barriers, his breathing apparatus now supplemented by additional atmospheric processors. A team of Mindweaver telepaths sat in a separate box. Their job to monitor the judge's mental state and intervene if necessary. Case 47 Alpha 2. Earth Mining Rights versus Kethfer Collective, the judge announced, his voice now coming through. Multiple speakers designed to filter out emotional undertones. The opposing counsel, a group of spider-like arachnoids representing the Kethfer Collective, took one look at the human delegation and immediately requested a private conference. Within minutes, they returned with a settlement offer that gave Earth everything they had originally demanded, plus mineral rights to 2 additional asteroids. "We find the terms acceptable," the lead arachnoid chittered nervously, avoiding direct eye contact with the humans. Sora blinked in surprise. "But we haven't even presented our case yet." "Unnecessary," the arachnoid replied quickly. "The collective wishes to avoid extended proceedings." It was the same pattern in their next case. A territorial dispute with the Vorthok Empire that had been scheduled for 3 days of arguments was resolved in under an hour, when the Vorthok delegation offered to withdraw their claims entirely. "This is the 3rd case this week," Sara observed as they left the courthouse. "They're not even trying to fight us anymore. They'd rather give us what we want than face us in extended litigation," Hyanwu realized. "They're terrified of what might happen if we get emotional in front of their judges." Dongmin watched as more armored bailiffs took positions around their transport vehicle. "We're not just winning cases. We're changing their entire system. Look around us." Indeed, the transformation was remarkable. The enhanced protection protocols had grown beyond just courtroom security. Diplomatic facilities across the galaxy were now installing similar measures. Hotels that housed human delegates were upgrading their emotional dampening systems. Even restaurants were beginning to require special permits to serve human customers. "The irony is incredible," Sora said as their heavily escorted convoy made its way through the city. "Earth's representatives are achieving more diplomatic success through perceived threat than we ever did through traditional negotiation." Captain Vextar's voice crackled through their communication system. "Your species has done something unprecedented in galactic history. You have made the entire judicial system afraid to face you directly. That is a form of power that even the most advanced military forces cannot achieve." As they returned to their quarters, Hyanwu reflected on the strange turn of events. Humanity had stumbled into the galactic community, expecting to be the junior partners, the new species learning from their more advanced neighbors. Instead, they had become the most feared presence in the galaxy's legal system. Not through violence or threats, but through something far more powerful: the simple, terrifying ability to feel genuine emotion in a universe that had forgotten how to care. The victory celebration was short-lived. Ambassador Park Hyunwoo had barely finished reviewing the settlement documents from their 5th consecutive legal win when he noticed Captain Vextar standing in the courthouse corridor, his massive form creating an imposing shadow against the crystal walls. The Ergani warrior's usual aggressive posture seemed different somehow, more contemplative, almost vulnerable. Ambassador Vextar's deep voice rumbled through his translator as Park approached. "You wonder why we fear you." The directness of the statement caught Park off guard. He'd been wondering exactly that, but hearing it spoken so bluntly by this battle-scarred giant was unsettling. "The thought had crossed my mind," he admitted. Vextar gestured toward the courtroom they had just left with one of his 4 massive arms. The limb moved with surprising grace despite its obvious power. "I have fought in 17 wars across 12 systems. I have seen worlds burn and civilizations fall. I have witnessed the destruction of entire species." Park noticed other aliens in the corridor giving them a wide berth, their various forms of locomotion, walking, floating, skittering, all accelerating as they passed the human and the Ergani warrior. The siege of Kepler Prime Vextar continued, his compound eyes reflecting the courthouse's crystalline lighting. 3 million casualties in a single day. The glass wars of the Andromedans, where entire planets were turned to molten slag. The hive mind rebellion, where billions died screaming as one voice. Kim Sora approached from the courtroom, having finished packing their legal materials. She had heard enough of the conversation to understand its gravity, or not the most. Advanced civilization here, she interjected quietly. We barely have faster-than-light travel. Our weapons are primitive compared to what we've seen. Vexter agreed, his mandibles clicking in a pattern that might have indicated respect. But you are the most ... complete. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Li Dongmin joined them, his security chief instincts having detected the unusual gathering. His hand didn't move toward his weapon, such gestures were pointless around someone like Vextar, but his posture shifted into a more alert stance. Vextar paused, and for a moment the translator remained silent as the warriors seemed to struggle with concepts that didn't translate easily between species. When you speak of injustice, he finally continued, you feel it in every fiber of your being. It is not an abstract concept to you. It burns in your chest, makes your hands shake with anger. Park remembered their first case, how Sora's voice had trembled with genuine outrage when describing the illegal seizure of human colony ships. He had thought it was just good advocacy, but now he wondered if that raw emotion had been what caused Judge Thexmoran's breakdown. When you describe conflict, Vextar went on, you do so with the knowledge that your species has survived the worst of itself and chosen to be better. You carry the weight of your own darkness, but you have transformed it into wisdom. The warriors' forearms moved in a complex gesture that seemed part salute, part defensive posture. In the Battle of Proxima 7, I watched human soldiers throw themselves into plasma fire to save wounded enemies. Not because tactical doctrine demanded it, not because it served a strategic purpose, but because they could not live with themselves. If they did otherwise, Sora's eyes widened. He fought alongside humans, the Terran Defense Force, 7th Expeditionary Unit, Vextar confirmed. 3 years ago, during the Outer Rim conflicts, I had heard of your species but never encountered you in combat. His compound eyes seemed to focus on a distant memory. Your Captain Morrison held a defensive position for 18 hours against impossible odds, not to achieve victory but to buy time for civilian evacuation ships to escape. Dongmin straightened at the mention of military service. Did they make it out? Every single transport, Vextar replied. 40,000 refugees, including women and children from 6 different species. Captain Morrison's entire unit was wiped out, but they succeeded in their mission. The translator crackled slightly as it processed what sounded like admiration in the warrior's voice. When I asked the survivors why they fought so hard for beings they had never met, they looked at me as if I had asked why they breathed. The corridor around them had become completely empty now. Other courthouse visitors apparently unwilling to linger near. The intense conversation between the human delegation and the legendary Ergani captain. When you show compassion, Vextar continued, it is not calculated. It is not a strategic decision based on optimal outcomes. It is genuine, flowing from some deep well within you that my species abandoned millennia ago. Dongmin crossed his arms, his military background making him skeptical of praise that seemed too good to be true. And that's frightening to you? Terrifying. Vextar confirmed without hesitation. My people, the Ergani, were once capable of great emotion. We had art, music, poetry that could move entire populations to tears. But emotion led to irrationality. Irrationality led to poor decisions. Poor decisions led to military defeats. He gestured to his scarred exoskeleton with 2 of his arms simultaneously. We evolved beyond such weaknesses. We make decisions based on logic, efficiency, survival probability, calculations. We became the perfect warriors because we eliminated the inefficiency of caring. The translator's mechanical voice couldn't convey the full weight of what Vextar was revealing. But Park could sense the profound loss underneath the words. The crystalline quartz evolved beyond emotion to achieve perfect justice through pure logic. The Mindweavers transcended individual feelings to access collective consciousness. The Zephyrians abandoned passionate response in favor of calculated efficiency. Vextar's multiple eyes fixed on each human in turn. Every species in this galaxy has followed the same path. Evolution beyond emotion, beyond the primitive responses that once defined us. Until we showed up, Sora realized. Till you showed up, Vextar agreed. When humans enter our courtrooms, you force us to remember what we lost in our evolution. You make us feel echoes of what we once were, before we became so perfectly, coldly rational. A group of maintenance drones floated past, their sensors, detecting the conversation but programmed to ignore anything not directly related to their duties. Even the machines seemed more emotionally present than some of the species they had encountered. You remind us of what we could have been, Vexter said, his voice dropping to what might have been a whisper for his species, and for beings who pride themselves on having transcended primitive emotions. That is the most unsettling thing imaginable. Park looked at his companions, seeing his own thoughts reflected in their faces. They had come to the galaxy expecting to learn from more advanced civilizations, only to discover that advancement might not mean what they had assumed. We scare you because we still care, Park said quietly. You terrify us, Vexstar corrected, because you prove that caring and strength are not mutually exclusive, that wisdom and emotion can coexist, that perhaps in our rush to become perfect, we became something less than complete. The weight of that revelation settled over them like the atmosphere of an alien world, familiar enough to breathe, but strange enough to remind them they were far from home. The morning sun of Nexus Prime cast long shadows across Ambassador Park. Hei-En-Wu's office as he stood at the massive crystal window, watching the city below transform before his eyes. 6 months had passed since their first terrifying encounter in the Galactic Court. The changes were beyond anything he could have imagined. Construction mechs the size of skyscrapers moved with precise coordination, their massive arms placing reinforced crystal panels onto what would become the new Terran wing of the courthouse. The structure was unlike anything else in the galaxy, a fortress disguised as a temple of justice, designed specifically to contain the dangerous phenomenon known as human emotion. The irony is incredible, Park muttered to himself, watching a crew of arachnoid workers install what looked like military-grade shielding around the building's perimeter. We came here as supplicants, and now they're building monuments to their fear of us. The intercom on his desk chimed with an incoming message. Captain Vexstar's distinctive voice filled the room, though the translator made his excitement sound more like controlled aggression. Ambassador, the promotion ceremony is beginning. The Galactic Security Council is formally establishing the Terran Guard. Through his window, Park could see the ceremony taking place in the central plaza. Hundreds of elite warriors from across the galaxy stood in perfect formation, their various forms of military discipline creating a bizarre but impressive display. Crystalline soldiers refracted the sunlight into dazzling patterns while hovering. Nebulan fighters cast shifting shadows from their containment suits. At the center stood Vexstar, his battle-scarred exoskeleton now bearing the golden insignia of the newly created Terran Guard. The unit was composed entirely of volunteers, warriors who had requested the dangerous assignment of working directly with humans. What had once been considered a punishment detail had somehow become the most prestigious posting in galactic security. Sir Kim Sora entered his office, her arms full of data tablets and legal documents. Her role had evolved far beyond legal advisor. She was now effectively the galaxy's leading expert on human-alien emotional interface protocol, a field of study that hadn't existed 7 months ago. 3 more cases settled out of court when the defendants learned we were representing. The plaintiffs, she reported, setting the tablets on his desk. The Regellian Trade Consortium withdrew their complaint about shipping route violations. The Centauri Mining Guild agreed to our terms for asteroid belt access. And get this, the Vorthok Empire just offered to pay us reparations for a conflict. That happened before Earth even had space travel. Park shook his head in amazement. They're not even trying to fight us anymore. Why would they? Sora replied, pulling up holographic displays of their recent cases. Yesterday I watched a crystalline attorney literally crack during opening statements when he had to argue against human refugees seeking asylum. The judge called a recess after 15 minutes and ordered mandatory emotional counseling for the entire legal team. The data was staggering. Human legal teams now had a 100% success rate in galactic courts, not because they were better lawyers, but because opposing counsel consistently chose settlement over the psychological trauma of extended litigation against emotionally authentic humans and the Confederation border dispute. Park asked, remembering the complex case that had been scheduled to take months of testimony. Resolved in 15 minutes, Sora replied with a grin.
Oh.
The moment our delegation walked into the courtroom, the Confederation's representatives offered us everything we asked for, plus mineral rights to 2 additional systems, plus priority trading status, plus a formal apology for wasting our time. Lee Dongman looked up from his security briefings, which had evolved into something resembling military intelligence reports. The Galactic Court Administration is requesting a meeting. They want to discuss expanding Terran protocols to other areas of galactic law. The security protocols had grown far beyond simple courtroom procedures. Hotels across the galaxy now required special permits to house human guests. Restaurants had installed emotional dampening fields in their dining areas, even public transportation. Systems had implemented human-safe compartments with reinforced emotional barriers. They're treating us like walking weapons of mass destruction, Stongman observed, scrolling through reports of increased security measures across 12 star systems. Except instead of destroying buildings, we apparently destroy their ability to think rationally. Park's communication console lit up with an incoming priority message from Earth Command. The holographic display showed Admiral Sarah Kim, her face beaming with excitement. Diplomatic Corps expansion approved, she announced. We're recruiting our most emotional and passionate advocates for galactic assignment. Psychologists are recommending candidates based on their capacity for genuine empathy, moral outrage, and authentic emotional expression. The irony was so perfect, it was almost beautiful. Earth's diplomatic strategy had accidentally become the recruitment of their most emotionally expressive citizens, the very people who would have been considered too unstable for traditional diplomacy. We're not sending our best lawyers, Park realized. We're sending our most human humans. The results were already visible across the galaxy. Species that had spent millennia evolving beyond emotion were quietly establishing human studies programs at their universities. Crystalline scholars were researching something they called authentic response theory. Mindweaver philosophers were writing treatises on the lost art of individual feeling. Soft chime indicated another visitor. Captain Vexstar entered the office, his new golden insignia gleaming against his scarred exoskeleton. The promotion had elevated him from simple bailiff to the commander of an elite unit that was reshaping galactic security. Ambassador, he said, his forearms moving in the complex gesture that served as an Ergani salute. The Terran Guard is now fully operational. We have requests from 47 different judicial districts for our services. How many guards do we have? Dongman asked. 12. 1,000 volunteers from AT3 species, Vexstar replied. The selection process is intense. Candidates must demonstrate the psychological stability to work directly with humans without suffering emotional breakdown. Park looked out his window again, watching as another group of armored bailiffs escorted a visibly nervous judge toward the courthouse. The judge, a tall Zephyrian with iridescent feathers, was flanked by a medical team equipped with emergency psychological intervention equipment. We're not just winning cases anymore, Park said quietly. We're changing their entire civilization. The transformation was subtle, but undeniable. Art galleries across the galaxy were quietly commissioning works that explored themes of primitive emotion. Music that had been considered too chaotic and unpredictable was experiencing a renaissance. Literature departments were studying human poetry, trying to understand how beings could create beauty from pain. They're learning to feel again, Sora observed, watching the news feeds on her tablet. It's slow, it's terrifying for them, but it's happening. The evidence was everywhere. Suicide rates among advanced species were dropping as individuals rediscovered the value of emotional experience. Political systems that had operated on pure logic for millennia were beginning to incorporate concepts like compassion and moral intuition into their decision-making processes. A priority alert flashed. On Park's desk console, the Galactic Council was requesting an emergency session to discuss the human problem. But the tone of the message had changed. Instead of fear and hostility, there was something that looked almost like ... Hope smiled as he prepared to respond to the summons. Humanity had stumbled into the galactic community expecting to be the students, the junior partners, learning from their advanced neighbors. Instead, they had become the teachers, showing an entire galaxy what they had lost in their rush toward perfect rationality. As he watched the sun set over Nexus Prime, casting the Terran wing of the courthouse in golden light, Park realized they weren't just representing Earth anymore. They were representing something far more precious. The idea that feeling deeply, caring genuinely, and responding authentically weren't weaknesses to be evolved beyond, but strengths to be cherished. The galaxy was slowly remembering how to be alive. The end.